I want to learn the most I possibly can, cheapest way possible, as fast as I can. Let me put something in front of somebody that I know is wrong, just to see what happens. We did this together, sitting in a Starbucks with a stack of paper, just trying to get people to engage with us. Hey, I'll buy your coffee if you sit with me for 10 minutes and look at this stack of paper. And most people are like, sure, yeah, good time. You can learn a lot that way. But the hardest part is just getting over the fact that some people will say no, but most people will say yes. My name is Jason. I'm a designer for 20 plus years, worked across many industries, primarily in the financial space. I started my career pre-internet, which is kind of interesting to me. I've kind of had a lot of different roles across a lot of different organizations, most recently in sort of a design leadership place. And yeah, design thinking is a big part of it, UX, all of it.
I'd love if we could start off and do some definitions. So how would you define design?
Yeah, design is such a huge thing now. When you spin the wheel of what design is, right, you're always adding new wedges to that wheel, right? So I think by and large, it would involve some sort of like advocacy for understanding what like customer need is, executing against that need. Behavior is the currency of design. So if you can understand what like a customer's behavior is or a person's behavior is, and then offer them up something that makes that behavior easier, right? So you're looking for some change in behavior, then you've done a good job using design. I think that it can be applied to all sorts of areas of all kinds of things. Obviously, I'm biased, but I think that like having design infiltrate every single area of your business is going to make the quality of your products better and people happier. So I kind of look at it, it's like almost like we've become like gap fillers, and we're like Spackle. Like designers are Spackle.
And it can span business model, user experience, physical experience, everything from what it's like to walk into a bank or what it's like to open up and try to check your balance. I've literally spoken to you about projects and challenges across that entire spectrum of physical through digital design.
Well, currently in the position I have, I focus more around, I would say, kind of creating a design capability. So like the sort of idea of so I think kind of everybody knows what UX is now. Everybody knows that design's important, right? And I think to varying degrees, people understand kind of how to make that a reality in their own business or their own organization. Designers, the further upstream you involve a designer, the more de-risking you get from your ideas. When you're thinking about where design can really kind of play an important role, I think that it runs the gamut. And again, it's very different across different organizations. Different companies need different things. Where I'm trying to focus is into saying like, before you decide on what you want to do, before you start like writing code, before you start making business model decisions, you should really understand what the user needs are. It may not change your thinking, but at least you know what those are. I think there's a good positive push to say like delivering against a business requirement is totally fine. It makes perfect sense. It's just, have you aligned that business goal with an unmet user need, or have you articulated the value that you're going to drive to a group of people or a customer or whatever? And can you make those two things sync up? Because a lot of times we have business goals that don't really take into consideration what a customer's need is or the value that it's like a trade-off, right? Totally. So like if I'm asking you to do something, like I should be able to tell you what you're going to get for that behavior change, right? Whether it be opening more checking accounts or having multiple products with us, right? We want to make sure that like we don't just want share of wallet. We want to provide a really good value for that, because that's what kind of makes the whole thing work.
There, like you said, are trade-offs. So if you if the tech team, the engineering team comes in and builds an app that shows everyone's balances as opposed to the right user their balance, obviously that accomplished the feature of show customers their bank balance, but probably not an appropriate design solution in that silly example. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Probably a very ill-defined set of criteria for what you're trying to do as well, right? So we can help with
yeah,
that too.
yeah, yeah. And I say it that way because, we have junior and rising software engineers, analytics folks, and product UX folks that are involved with what we're doing at Workback and are seeking ways to break into new careers. So I just share that because design isn't just for designers. Engineers and analytics leaders need to think about design as well to avoid building the wrong thing, working on the wrong
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would also say that design, because there are so many things that fall under that umbrella, so many activities, so many roles, that design is kind of if you're looking to switch, design in this broad sense is a really interesting place to look, because there are so many opportunities within this industry, and there are so many companies that are starting to ramp up, and they're starting to hire again, and they're looking for talented people in all these different facets. Like you might have a job. I don't know. Pick something, right? You're a project manager, you're a dishwasher. I don't know, but you have a really good knack for writing, right? UX writers are really useful. They're incredibly important. I kind of think of writing in the UX sense as like the sound design of a movie. Like you only notice it when it's bad, but when it's really good, it just makes absolute sense, and it just makes the whole thing work. Um, and smaller organizations, smaller design teams, they can't hire a dedicated UX writer, but that is such a critical role. Um, so there's room for everybody in these areas that you might not have thought about. And so I think career switching, especially into this industry, is really there's just a ton of opportunities.
Would you mind just breaking down design in terms of the types of roles that are available?
It really just depends on the company that's hiring, right? Like what size team they're trying to get to, like what kind of roles they have. Like gigantic, you know, organization that has 300 plus designers, they're going to have a lot of little nichey kind of roles. Smaller companies that have like very small design teams, you're going to have to wear a bunch of hats. And honestly, like both are great. And truth be told here, I don't have a ton of agency experience, so I can't speak to that so much. My jam has really been in like internal design teams in big companies. So, I'm sure that folks with agency background and experience would have different opinions, and I would highly recommend hearing what they have to say about this too. But the way I see it is, as we kind of talked about one other time, right? So there's sort of, in my world, three kind of big buckets of design, right? So you have like the sort of research part, you have the executional part, and then you have the operational part. And, the first two I think are pretty commonly understood in broad strokes. And then this last one is sort of relatively new, right? So within the past 4 or 5 years, this idea of design ops has started to really kind of shift into higher gear. And we can discuss why. But I think the getting into those first two buckets for a minute, right? So user research is becoming a growing area of focus for people. I think a lot of folks see it as a way to break into the design world without having to acquire a ton of we'll call them hard skills. And you're such a critical part of the process of creating a product or a service. And then you have the executional part. You have like user experience designers, folks that maybe at one time were called information architects. Maybe you still have those. I don't know. Visual designers, interaction designers, your writers, your UX writers, or content strategists. I kind of think of those as the people that are kind of more on the executional side. They're using like design tools to make things, right? And they're building prototypes and iterating, and they're working in squads to like generate assets so the team can build stuff against it, things like that, right?
That upfront community of user researchers, that's survey writing, that's deciphering data, that's understanding user intent, that's really figuring out where the problems are to work on. And then just to play back what you just shared, design execution, that next step is having tools that are used for prototyping, for Sketch, Figma, InVision, those types of tools to help take the requirements that have been defined and try to bring those to life for the tech teams and analytics teams and leadership teams to understand what the scope is. Is that right?
More or less, yeah. I mean, obviously semantics, but I would say that there's overlap there as well. So these aren't like you're in this group or you're in that group. I think that these are more like roles or activities. So you can be a UXer, have like a tremendous skill set in building interfaces in Figma and all that, and still do a ton of great user research. So it isn't necessarily like you're one or the other. I want to make sure that that's really clear. Like you can do both. You can do it all if you want. I just kind of see it breaking into those two groups. I try to emphasize that like user research is about uncovering user need or defining problems to be solved and kind of outcomes to be achieved. I kind of bristle at the word requirement because I think of requirements as more like technical things. So like in your example, right? So a requirement is that if I look at my balance, I only see my balance. But a problem to be solved is I want to be able to see my balance because I want to know how much money I have, right? So there's like a problem to be solved, an outcome to be achieved, and then you might tack on a requirement, but I only want to see my stuff, right? So I think that the upfront part is really about understanding like, hey, people can't see their balance, right? So like we want to change that, right? So there's a behavior there, or we're making it too difficult. There's too many steps, too many clicks, too many things in the way. So removing friction, things like that. So user research as an activity is really kind of critical there. And the further upstream you can get your research going, the more de-risking you're applying to your product decisions. So when we think about, like, say, Agile, for instance, right, it all kind of starts with a backlog, a list of features that you're going to build. And there is an assumption that those features are the right features to build. And unless you're completely just relying on the intuition of your product owner, you may or may not be building the right stuff. So applying user research up front before you start to prioritize things, or as you're prioritizing, or just as you're trying to understand things, you're going from uncertainty to certainty. You're removing the risk against the confidence of like, what are you doing and why is it valuable? So user research is huge there. Moving on down the line, you'll have folks that really just love making beautiful things. They love using Figma to create gorgeous objects that people can use and interact with and be like, wow, that was so great and gorgeous and so easy to use. Can't understate the importance of aesthetic beauty to these things. Like you get a lot of forgiveness if you're using something that's like simple, easy, beautiful. Those are not bad things. There's room for everybody, and those things are equally as important.
Thanks for double clicking into those first two phases, because I think those are very common areas where people seek to learn more, and they take classes about how to listen to users and conduct user research, and how do I develop prototypes and test those with users. So how does that build up to design ops, and where does design ops come in? And you mentioned over the last couple of years, it's also becoming a much more well-known or popular field. How does that fit in?
When you have a group of people that are operating in the spaces that designers operate in, they need a special kind of support, which I think many organizations maybe don't quite understand or don't know how to react to. And that's not a criticism. It's really just a sort of evolutionary thing, right?
Yep.
I don't really know why it came to be. I'm sure that there are a lot of people who have ideas. I mean, I've read books about it, and I think that, again, every company is different. So you need to kind of react to people in individual cases. But my feeling is that a lot of times designers spend a lot of time doing things that are not design related. Those things are design ops. And so instead of spreading all of those tasks across your team, you centralize those activities into a group of people where they are now responsible for those things and they like doing them. That opens up your designers time to really focus on the things they should be focusing on, or will add more value to the thing you're building. So ops to me is a way of saying, how do we help designers be more efficient, happier? How do we make sure they have the things they need? How do we proactively ask them for the things that maybe they don't know how to ask for, right? Design leadership is operations. Like, design leaders fall into that last bucket. Because generally when you take that step up to, like, say, running a team, you're not probably going to be responsible for building an interface. Now, you might be, but in a lot of cases, that's at least going to be a smaller part of your job. And the rest of your job is operations. Do you have the right equipment to do your job well? Like, is there a policy in your company that says that everybody gets the same Windows laptop? Well, designers might need something different. They might need more RAM. They might need new software that the company doesn't have a license for. We might need Macs. We might need bigger monitors. Like, those things sound small, but when it helps you get your job done better and raises the quality of your life, then everybody starts to see, like, wow, this is actually really great. This is making people happier or whatever. So it's like a small example, but like, whose job is it to come when the contract comes up for renewal? Whose job is it to sign off on it? It's usually the person who's running that team, right? That's operations.
Makes total sense. And I think a good takeaway from this is people who are considering breaking into tech careers and they are interested in products and experiences, you shouldn't be so quick to dismiss roles that use the word design, because there's quite a number of, and it's company specific what those roles might entail. So there could be opportunities that you're skipping over or not looking at closely enough, including if you're a front end software engineer, React, HTML, CSS, you could be doing UX, and maybe you could be an amazing UX person and you're not thinking of yourself as someone who would work on design or product. You're thinking of yourself as a software engineer. But I think there are some opportunities there for some of the talent we see that know how to do front end, that know how to make things from nothing, and they're only looking at back end or full stack roles. So I think there's a lot of opportunities there for career switchers as well. And I wanted to segue us to actually talk and wind it back even more to hear about your story, your career journey. And I'd love to hear a bit how you got started in this wild world of design, and what was your career journey like?
Yeah, it's weird. Like, as I tick through it, I'm like, am I even a designer? I'm not really even sure. Like, I mean, I started, like, printing T-shirts when I was like 19. Like, I didn't go to college or anything, so I just took a weird different path, right? And I just fell into this strange world of T-shirt printing, and so I learned an awful lot, just the mechanics of how to print, like printmaking, right? So, four color process, the soft, kind of like the digital aspects of it, right? Doing separations, all those things, right? And it was super cool and it was fun and all that, but it was, it was minimum wage at a time when the minimum wage was like $4 an hour. So it wasn't great. And I just was getting more interested in the technical aspects of it. And so I had an opportunity to move into doing offset printing. So, again, not like graphic design necessarily. There were aspects of it, but it was production print work, So I'm like typesetting menus and like building business cards and like all this like kind of stuff that you might not think is all that interesting, but I was like psyched. It was so fun. I was learning all sorts of crazy stuff that I was like, I didn't even know that's how books were made. I didn't know how that's like how you lay out a magazine. Like, that was really cool stuff to learn. And around that time, the Mosaic browser came out and it said, we're going to have images. And I was like, well, this is the new print, right? So I started learning how to make websites. So I guess that, and this is like mid 90s at this point. So it's kind of like I took a bit of a more technical role, I guess, or technical roles. Like I was learning how to write JavaScript. I was learning how to write action scripts for the real old folks who are watching this. I like, I learned Flash. I learned, Director. I was doing those like what was at the time called multimedia, right? So I'm sure if you dig further enough, if you scroll far enough down on my LinkedIn profile, you might actually come across something that says like multimedia on it. Because that was the new hotness at the time. Like that was how the web was becoming this place for like really high end visuals, really cool stuff. And I just fell into it and I loved it. And around that time, I was late 90s, I was working at this tiny little kind of boutique interactive shop. We started reading Jakob Nielsen. So Jakob Nielsen's sort of like the great granddaddy of usability, user-centered design.
Nielsen Norman Group.
Yes, exactly. So Jakob Nielsen was writing these books about, usability and accessibility. Go to where the work is being done so you can see people do the work. So that way you can better understand how to make their lives easier, right? What we now call human-centered design. And as we were trading those books around and, he was crapping all over Flash because it wasn't accessible and all those things, it was kind of hard to hear, but like you kind of knew that he was right. So we had a client that was like a major, kind of brand name financial company. And they asked us to go to the, New York Stock Exchange and watch how stockbrokers do their thing. And so we got to watch them on the floor doing their thing. And it helped us understand like what they need to know, how fast do they need to know it, when do they need to know it. And it totally reinformed how we wanted to approach like designing this sort of like dashboard for stock traders. And yeah, this was like 1998, I don't know, 96, something like that. I was just amazed at how like this was just shining a whole new light on what we do and how we do it, right? And then, the dot-com burst and, we all lost our jobs and started, I think I mowed lawns for a while because I was totally unemployable because I was a web guy. So, but then, fast forward a few years and like I'm working at a big financial company in their lab, and I'm creating a design capability and hiring designers and saying, how do we want to be? How do we want to be? How do we want to show up? How do we want to like? What's our philosophy for this stuff? And like human centeredness is always the center of it, right? That's like the core of it all. And then I fell in with some Stanford D school grads around the time I met you, and some Rotman grads, and they were showing me how design thinking works. It's like, yeah, this is Jakob Nielsen all over again, just with like better slides, better jargon, better visuals,
But also like real testing. I mean, the first experience I ever had with user experience design was I came into your lab and I was given a fake paper credit card and asked to decide what I thought about signing up for it and, the experience and concerns. And, I think I stayed for an hour after it ended and you guys couldn't get rid of me. But that was the first time I'd actually seen the idea of getting feedback at a phase where it was literally a piece of paper. It wasn't a made up credit. It wasn't a real credit card. It was, and your team was ready to hear whatever we said, good, bad, or ugly. And it was all written down, not just the good things. I was really struck by that such a large financial services institution could take negative feedback. And is that common for designers to like listen to the negative feedback? And it's a leading question because I know it's yes, but yeah, it's a
Yes, it
conflict that
is. I mean, yeah, I'll say this over my career, I've seen attitudes from designers change tremendously when it comes to that kind of thing. I've been in situations, and granted, this is a long time ago now, but I've been in situations where designers, they didn't have a process that was highly focused on the user. It was more common that you would see a tremendous amount of competitive analysis done. So if I'm building an experience around selling pet food online, right, I'm going to go and look at who's doing pet food sales online. I'm going to look at like the direct competition first. I'm going to start there. And I'm going to Frankenstein together some wireframes of the best parts of those experiences based on my opinion. I'm going to present those back to the business and say, based on my research, I've decided, because I'm an experienced designer, what the right thing to do is. And they all say, okay, let's do it. Over the past several now years, that attitude has completely changed. So experienced designers now understand, I think more than ever, that your intuition is absolutely valuable, of course, but you don't want to be wrong when you've done no evidence gathering. Like, you just don't. It's just such a terrible place to be. So for me, where I personally turned the corner was when I realized that, like, my dumb ego and my big stupid ideas that I'm willing to, like, die on every hill for are completely irrelevant compared to showing people things, letting them tell me what's not working, and then just shut up and listen. Like, that was just such a huge moment for me as a professional designer, was to say, like, the more you're talking, the less you're learning, right? And if learning is important, which I think it should be, then you just got to learn how to shut up and take it. And I learned from others that there's a lot of great ways to use bad feedback, to seek bad feedback, right? So, like, creating the hairy arm prototype, like creating something that is wrong, bad, showing it to people just so that they can crap on it. And that opens up the door for a huge conversation. It's going to be so generative. This has nothing to do with me. This has nothing to do with my ability or my ego or any of those things, my intuition, none of that. It all goes out the window when you say to yourself, I want to learn the most I possibly can, cheapest way possible, as fast as I can. Let me put something in front of somebody that I know is wrong, just to see what happens. And I mean, we did this together, sitting in a Starbucks with a stack of paper, just trying to get people to engage with us. Hey, if this stack of paper was a fake application on your iPhone, what would you do? And here's a gift card. I'll buy your coffee if you sit with me for 10 minutes and look at this stack of paper. And most people are like, sure, yeah, good time. You can learn a lot that way. And the hardest part is just getting over the fact that, like, some people will say no, but most people will say yes.
There's definitely an uncomfortable feeling that first time where I approached a stranger with a paper prototype, and it's embarrassing. But as soon as you get through that first one, you're like, oh my God, that was amazing. I got a bunch of great feedback. Let me do it again. And I think that for someone who's switching careers or thinking about UX or product management or software engineering, like, sketch something on paper before you spend 15 hours investing your heart and soul into it to then show it to someone, because it feels way worse when you have your heart and soul get torn apart. If you're you're not Picasso. You're a scientist. You're trying to test and learn what works, not create art. You're not an artist. You're a researcher, and that was that's what I learned specifically from that coffee shop experience. Was I thought I had the right idea, and we were quite off base on that. But
Yeah.
back on your career, just taking that forward. So you got into the lab situation. How did how did that make an impact on you and carry you through the next couple of years of your career?
Well, what I realized when I got really deeply involved with design thinking and the ethos around design thinking, especially, is that it is a very much a taught sort of methodology, right? Using it, you're doing it, you're teaching it. Like, you're always trying to teach it to other people. I don't know why. I don't know why that is. But if you became a Python programmer, right? I don't know that the next thing you would do is teach other people Python. I mean, maybe you would, but I don't know. But I will say this, that design thinking, for some reason, is a taught thing. I draw so many parallels to, like, the Star Wars mythology and design thinking. So many, too many. But, like, you sort of enter as a Padawan, you become a master, you take on a Padawan. It's kind of that thing as well. So what I realized was, like, I loved teaching. I loved the facilitation aspect of it, and I loved introducing UX designers to this way of thinking and this way of working, and showing them how they can apply these sort of like user-centered, human-centered techniques. You might think that because the word design is in the title of design thinking, that it's just a natural progression or a natural thing for UXers to use and do. That's not really what it's for. It's really for introducing this idea of like iteration and being wrong and being okay with it to folks that are in charge of the budget, right? Designers almost never hold the budget for the project they're working on. So when you think about where the buck stops, like, you got to get those people thinking about customer need. And so I started to realize maybe that's what I should be doing. Maybe that's where I should be trying to spend my time is in the is in introducing people, other people, not designers necessarily, them too, but other people to this world. And I think what's interesting is you brought up a couple times around like software engineering, especially. Like everybody on a project, on a team, is making design decisions. Everybody's making those decisions. They may not really understand them, but they are. So when we think about user experience is not limited to the flow, where the buttons are, how the information lays out. The experience is in the feedback loop. What happens if you get an error message? What's the performance like? Like how fast does this page load? Those are user experience things, but designers don't have any control over the speed in which a page loads. That's engineering. So when you start to share this idea of experience with a broader group of people, you can start to kind of like, everybody starts to realize their role in the experience that the user is going to have. You might have created an experience that is so high, the performance is so high, like the page loads so quickly, the data is flowing so fast that the user types in a bunch of personal information, they click submit, boom, they get their feedback immediately. And the customer's actually like, that happened too fast. There's no way that this system actually took the time to understand what I just typed in and then told me this. And so you might have to say, you know what, we need to put a pause here. We need to actually put like a little loading wheel. We need a half a second of lag to make the customer feel comfortable that the computer did enough thinking to then give them the right response. Positive friction. It's a trick. But if it makes the customer feel better about what just happened, that's good user experience. And so sometimes you have to say, those things you did to make this thing so awesome, performing so quickly and fast, is actually having a negative effect. Isn't that hilarious? And they're going to be like, no, not at all hilarious. You say, I know, but that's what's happening. Prototyping to the rescue. When you build a prototype that's clickable, that does the things that you believe you are building, and you hear customer feedback, I don't understand why this happened so quickly. There's no way that it could have done the thing, right? It couldn't have analyzed all that information and told me, given me bad news or whatever, or good news. Those are important moments. And when you can show a group of people, hey, here's like the videos from the tests we did. Here's everybody freaking out because this is happening too quickly. The engineers will have to realize that it's like they did exactly what we wanted them to do. They did it really well, right? It's just not having the right effect. So if you build a prototype, they can see that and they can say, all right, cool. So we can't slow it down. Like we've done our job so well. We're actually not going to slow it down. But what we could do is like build like a little, I don't know, throw a GIF in the page, have that load for a couple seconds, and then boom, they're off and running. Does nothing. There's no technology happening. Purely a trick. But it's giving the user the confidence that something happened the way they would expect it to, or the way they would want it to. Everybody wins. Everybody wins. So there are things where you don't necessarily maybe need a prototype, but I personally believe, and I'm sure this will upset somebody, but like I don't think wireframes are worth it anymore. I feel like if designers never made another freaking wireframe, that'd be great, because I don't get anything from looking at them. I would much prefer you build me some kind of clickable thing, because there is no such thing as a flat, stateless thing. Like we don't do that. Like that's like graphic design. That's like and again, no knock to graphic design. It's just not, it's not what we're usually building when we're talking about these kinds of interactive tools, digital tools. Generally, there's some kind of input from a customer, a user, and then there's some kind of output back to them. Like, what did I just get from my input? This is funny. So my wife's an artist, right? And so we talk an awful lot about this. Art is not design, right? Design is not art, right? Art is a way to express something, to get somebody to feel a certain way, in broad terms, right? And you can argue with that definition. That's fine. Design to me is really a lot more about, understanding what your user is striving to achieve, that thing they need to either do, that thing they need to, that as the jobs to be done framework calls it, like that better you that you want to be, right? It really boils down to the sort of like, there's a good chance that there is a business goal somewhere in there, right? There's some kind of thing that needs to happen to either save money, generate more money, create more customer love, whatever the thing is, whatever the currency is that you're trying to like increase or decrease. And like you said, which I think is actually really spot on, is that like we are kind of junior scientists more than we are junior artists, because you might be an incredible visual designer and you might have this eye and this way of building things that is so beautiful, right? But it's not AAA, WCAG accessible. It's it's not going to work, right? It's not that it's not beautiful. It's just that it's not, right. And so understanding that right is way more important than beautiful, right? But design loves constraints. So when you tell a designer, here are the kind of constraints we need to work with it, that actually makes things easier and more fun a lot of time.
Knowing all that nuance there, what does it mean to be, how can someone who's switching careers start to think about retraining how they think to better prepare for meeting teams like yours and standing out by, even as soon as in the traits and skills they develop, but also in their interview? How might someone demonstrate that they're with it?
I've been an instructor at General Assembly myself, so I understand a little bit about career switching, right? And I'll say this, that one of the big pluses, one of the big advantages that folks that are reskilling or changing careers have, is that they already know what it's like to have a job. They already know what it's like to work for a company, navigate the personal dynamics and just versus somebody who's like fresh out of college, let's say, and maybe hasn't worked before. So there is an advantage there, right? So you have job experience, just maybe not the job that you're doing now or you want to be doing, right? So there is an innate advantage there, I believe.
Yep.
I think that anyone who is new to a career will kind of have to start to accept that, like, you're going to be in a learning mode. I think generally people really do want to start to add value on day one. They want to, they're passionate. They want to show up and say, like, I am so glad that you made the decision to go with me. You could have gone with anybody, but you went with me, and I want to show up and I want to make sure that you know that you made the right choice. I applaud that. Huge. But it's okay to like learn. It's okay to slow down. It's okay to ask for help. It's in fact highly mature to ask for help. And I think it frankly is okay to know that, like, you don't know how to do anything yet. That's all right. Like I've been doing this for 20 plus years, and I show up on the first day of a new job and I'm like lost. I think when it comes to like seeking these candidates, finding people, interviewing, whatever it is, I think you have to focus on the things that you enjoy. Talk about what you want to get out of it. Talk about what makes you passionate. Like, why did you choose this path? You could have gone in any direction. Like, why this? Speak from the heart. I mean, a lot of what we're doing here, in sort of what I like to think of as a sort of like modern era of user experience, is being empathetic, and like leading with empathy. And I think if you can show that that makes sense to you, maybe talk about how you've tried that, how you've executed that, because frankly, leading with empathy, like just being empathetic, requires no training and no skill. You can do it around the dinner table. So just becoming comfortable with that aspect of sort of this world that we're in, and again, yeah, I think it's really important to discuss like why are you doing what you're doing now. I personally love when I meet someone who just has like an insane amount of passion and just wants to learn, and is okay doing the stuff that maybe isn't all that fun at first. If you're okay with that and you're okay with the growth, I think most employers at this point are like, they know that, like
Yeah.
there's room for everybody in this world. I really do believe that there is room for everybody.
Knowing that when someone's switching careers, they're going to go in that learning mode. Do you have any tips for people to really embrace those first few weeks on the job? And how can they more effectively learn through experiences?
I think it depends on how you're going to be absorbed into the organization. So like being onboarded, for instance, that,
Yeah.
some of it's just out of your control. I'll say that, right?
Yeah.
Follow your manager to all their meetings, right? Like ask to be involved in things just as a fly on the wall, just to get a sense of what's going on. Is there a style guide? Is there a design system? Are there some foundational sort of things that you need to know about, right? Seek those things out. Become a student of the visual language of the company. Become a student of who is doing what. Schedule time to talk to people. Like I say this a lot, and I really do believe it, that if you approach, as designers, if we approach almost anything as if it were just another research project, just another design exercise, all of a sudden you're getting all those same benefits, right? So like if you were to approach my new job as a design activity, what would you do? You would probably want to talk to subject matter experts, probably want to talk to customers. Now, what does that mean? Oh, well, I'm not sure. Like, is there user research that's been conducted? Can I look at some? Um, who are the SMEs? In this case, maybe it's other designers on the team. Maybe it's their peers. Talk to them, ask them questions, be a designer, and then use that to create a little roadmap for yourself. What do I want to be? Who do I want to be when I grow up? What do I want to do? What do I want to do in the first 3 months, 6 months, whatever however you think about it, right? Make the T-shaped people thing. I love the T, right? So make a T. So it's like, these are the things that you have a depth of knowledge in, and these are the things you have sort of a broad understanding of, right? And the ones on the outer, if you really want to go crazy, the ones on the outer ends are the ones that you know the least about. And then make a plan. How am I going to increase my knowledge in each of these things that I've put on my T? Try that. Having a way to talk about what you want to get out of your life, your career, really helps others to help you get there. One exercise I like to do with people is to say, look at your calendar from last week and just look at all the time you spent doing stuff, and just, I don't know, put a circle around the things that you felt were like really valuable, and put like a box around the things that you felt were kind of a big fat waste of time. And be real with yourself. How much time am I spending doing things that I don't think are all that valuable? And then bring that up. Bring it up to your boss, bring it up to your manager. Like, I want to be doing more of this, less of this. How can I make that happen? So these are not necessarily like things that new hires necessarily need to do. These are just things that we should all be kind of thinking about. That new person thing wears off really fast. Depending on the company, you might be the new person until they hire the next new person. So you were the new person, but it only lasted for like a month. And now you are just here, like you've just been here forever. So, it's okay to like be the new person. It's okay to say that. I don't know what the statute of limitations on being the new person is.
At least a year. At least a
At
year.
least, yeah, yeah.
It is a bit, I would say, counterintuitive for someone who might feel a bit of imposter syndrome. They've switched careers. Maybe they've landed in a UX or a product management or software engineering apprenticeship. and they kind of expect to be told what to do. And they come in on day one and say, okay, I'm ready. What should I do? But that very well, there should be some direction provided. But to your point, what if you had an answer for what I should be doing yourself? And what if you could, at the very least, have those goals and career aspirations ready, so when you're told what to do or you're getting feedback from your manager, you're able to, just like you said, share what you need, where you need help. It makes so much sense, and I wish more people did that.
For some reason, for forever, there has been this sort of like ongoing question, right? So check out any design group on LinkedIn, right? And you'll find the question: should designers learn how to write code? Should designers go get their MBA? Should designers go whatever, learn more, right? And I think, first of all, I don't ever hear any engineer saying, should I go learn how to interview a customer, right? For some reason, it's just designers that need to learn how to do what everybody else is doing. And again, I think that comes back to the Spackle part, right? Like we are
Yeah.
gap fillers in a lot of cases, right? But I think the new question is, do I as a designer know enough about how my company actually makes money? Do I know enough about how decisions get made at higher levels? Do I know enough about how things actually get done? So if as designers we become students of the process, we have a better chance at improving that process. So I myself am highly critical of process. And part of that is because I firmly believe there's a better way to do it. And it doesn't matter how great you're doing it. There's probably a better way. It might be a really small improvement, it might be a gigantic one, who knows? But where I think design is headed is that the value we provide can be applied to so many areas of a business that you're starting to see more service designers working on the operational flow or applying design to supply chain. These are systems, right? And when you take a designer's techniques and you apply them to system thinking, you're now doing service design. And service design is like awesome stuff, right? Service design to me is sort of the context in which you are adding your piece, right? So if you're coming into this world and you're new to design and you're like, I really love designing websites. Like I just love designing marketing websites. It's just really fun for me. Well, great. We love that. Think about where your marketing website lives as a piece to a much larger system. And that's going to help you become a way better website designer, because the thing you're building is not the beginning and the end of the story. The thing you're building is part of a much larger story. And when you start to understand the larger story, that's when you start to grow. You might not even know it's happening. Those are things that we should all be aware of in this world, that like delivering value to a customer, to a user, chances are the thing you're doing is a small part of a much larger initiative or portfolio of things. And the more you can understand about that, the more interesting the whole thing becomes.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time today. This was extremely informative. What's the best way for folks to either reach out and connect on social media or just otherwise learn more about you and your work?
No, I'm just joking. I guess LinkedIn probably the best way. I don't,
Yeah.
I cut Twitter and Facebook out of my life. I've never been happier. So yeah, LinkedIn, I guess.
Love that.
Yeah,
Love
LinkedIn.
that.
If you want to know about design stuff, or me, if you want to reach out through there, I'm always happy to respond.
Thank you so much for taking the time. This was super fun.
Yeah,
and
man.
I hope we could do it again soon.
Yeah, well, me too. Thanks for reaching out, and thanks for asking me all these great questions.
Awesome. All right. Thanks so much, Jason.
All right, see ya.